Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Jill. A lot of you already know me. Hopefully you're following along as we're tapering off towards the end of my book. My book is called Free Will. It's a memoir of my life, and I have been reading it chapter by chapter here on YouTube. If you want to start at the beginning, if you're not familiar yet, please click on my profile below here and go to my channel, and you can watch all of the videos so that the chapters are in chronological order. I'm so happy to have you. And as always, I'm so happy to have you that have been following along the whole time. It's just been a pleasure doing this adventure. So welcome back and thank you again. So when we left off in the last video, I had made a big move to go back to California, which was my home, which I was used to. And was kind of getting the idea that maybe it wasn't such a great idea and kind of getting really mixed up about listening to my own thoughts and everything. So I think we're going to do 3 chapters today because there's one really short one. So we are on chapter 46, and so we're just going to jump right in. Okay. By midsummer, I knew for certain I was going back to Oregon. My son and I had took advantage of being in Southern California while we were there. We spent the last of our time there on the beach and in the water every chance we could. My daughter was working as a manager at a KOA campground in Astoria, Oregon. She had called and asked if Riley would like to come up and work for the summer. Riley really liked the idea of getting his first job. And though, excuse me, and though he relished once again surfing in the warm waters of San Clemente, he was feeling disconnected here. I flew him up to Oregon and he began working at the KOA too. He loved that a big part of the work he was doing involved cruising around in a golf cart. He stayed with his sister in her cabin apartment along with her menagerie of animals. While he was away, I started to plan my return to Oregon. I searched the internet for housing up near Astoria, but being a tourist area, it tends to be extremely difficult to find housing. From my experience, housing was very difficult to come by all up and down the Oregon coast. Houses go quick. It's all the damn Californians moving up there. I got antsy, hadn't figured out where I was going to live, and didn't even wait for Riley to come back. I loaded my SUV and a U-Haul trailer with all of our belongings once again. I packed up and hit the road with music and books loaded on my phone to entertain me, this time on my own. That was a lot of time on the road by myself. I had time to think. I was sure of nothing. I didn't know where I was going to live. I felt calm and was looking forward to the adventure. At least that's what I told myself. In truth, there was a sadness in leaving California. I felt like the place I'd always felt was my home was evicting me. I didn't want to go, but I didn't know what else to do. I guess I was just gravitating toward my kids. I drove straight there and got there quickly. I told my dad and Marianne I would stop at their house and stay with them for the first night back. Then I would proceed north towards Astoria, where my daughter and son were. When I got to Astoria, my daughter arranged for us to stay in a lovely and luxurious log cabin type lodge at the KOA where she worked. We felt like we were on vacation there. The beaches were gorgeous. At night, we'd build a fire, and during the day, I was looking for a place to live. Again, I was having no luck with that. My birthday fell on Friday of that week. The kids took me out to an incredible meal at T. Paul's Supper Club in Astoria. Their green goddess quesadilla rocked my world, and I had a Marionberry gin smash in lieu of birthday cake. It was a perfect dinner with my favorite people. The three of us talked and laughed that night till our bellies ached. But back to reality, I only had the week to stay in the cabin as the busy season had begun. At the end of the week, I would be homeless. Panic came in hard. 2 nights before I had to check out of the cabin, I really lost it. Where would I go? What would I do? I felt like the stupidest person in the world. How did I let this happen? This is hard for me to write, but I thought about ending my life that night. I envisioned going to the bank and withdrawing all my money and hiding it somewhere for my kids to find later. I thought how they would be better off without me, that at least they'd have each other. They would bear the pain of another loss together. I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. I was just tired. Tired of moving, tired of working, tired of hitting dead ends. I had listened to my heart, been true to myself completely, and look to where it had brought me. I hated the reality that I would have to go to my dad's and live with him and his wife until I found something. Not because I didn't want to be with them, because I felt like I had made colossal mistakes and I was embarrassed. My ego was demolished. I had really fucked things up. I questioned my every decision. I felt so uninspired. I felt like a piece of debris that rolled up on the shore for no purpose and was useless and ignored and unsightly. Where was my strength, my confidence? Why wouldn't things start going right? Did I have to go through hell to get to heaven? Of course, my dad and Mary Ann welcomed us with open arms. They said we could stay as long as we needed. I didn't want to stay. I felt like a child. I felt that I had no control over what was happening in my life. A day or two after being there, I went down to the Crystal Wizard, my favorite store in Glen Eden Beach, to get some clarity and peace of mind. I found a deck of oracle cards that I'd never seen before. They intrigued me, so I bought them. I drove to the beach, sat in my car, and sobbed. What the hell had I done to my life? I had it all. The husband, the family, the friends, the big house at the beach, and then on my own even started a successful business. And I had nuked it all. Why? So that I could bounce around from one thing and then another? To have no attachment to anything or any place? To feel out of control and lost in a whirlwind of confusion and dismay? Why the fuck did I end up in this dark, ugly emotion that felt like I was alone and forgotten? I got my bearings. I cracked open the new deck of cards. I had been reading oracle cards for years. It had been my personal path to communicate with spirit or source, like a bridge to fill the gap between the physical and the spiritual. When I read cards, I get confirmation that I am connected to something greater or beyond. I usually read my cards daily. They always seem to blow my mind and touch my heart, how incredibly perfect they are for each day, whether they comfort or inspire me. The deck of cards I had gotten that day were called The Spirit Messages by John Holland. Normally, I meditate before doing any reading, but I was so distraught that day. The best I could muster was 3 deep breaths and the intention to feel better. I did my reading. The first card I pulled said, "You are not alone." It read, "We are here for you. We never left. Through all the sadness and loneliness, however, you cannot sense us near you or feel how much love we are sending you. We are your family, friends, and guides. You never walk alone. We walk right beside you." This made me cry more because it comforted me greatly. This reading reminded me that there was something more than the present circumstances. It reminded me that I'm never alone. I'm on a path that I have chosen, finally walking a path of my design. No, things were not unfolding as I had envisioned, but in this moment, I knew it would be okay. I suddenly was hit with so much to be grateful for. I had my dad. I had a place for my son and I to stay. I had money in the bank. I had my sisters, my stepmom. I had my kids. They were safe and sound and they were healthy. As I breathed in relief, I continued to take in air more deeply. I took in the love and gratitude that I was suddenly immersed in. The breath connected my body and soul. This breath connected me to the divine in me, and that which is all around me. Bliss overcame me. Sadness subsided. All was well. So, for some of you that were, are in the Jehovah's Witness organization for a long time, anything like oracle cards or tarot cards, that's a lot of you, that's way out there and everything. But it was something that just really resonated with me when I got introduced to it. And so it became something that was very much a part of me, which we'll read a little bit more about the place that took in my life. But I think what really came to my mind reading this was, and I just posted this on somebody's comments, I think on Altworldly's comments, it's something about, because when you're talking about the hardest part of some of this, it feels like you're in hell. It feels about leaving the organization. It feels so dark and heavy and painful. And I was saying that I love Winston Churchill's quote about, if you find I'm not saying it exactly, I'm paraphrasing. If you find yourself in hell, oh, that's what it is. If you're going through hell, keep going. And that's kind of where I was here. Winston Churchill said it in his ways, and probably a lot more secular point of view. But for me, I felt like I was in this dark place, and just the idea that I had to keep going. I needed to keep going. I wanted to keep going, even though I practically wanted to give up on life because everything seemed like it just wouldn't go right. And so the idea of just keep going. And for me, this is kind of the beginning of the description of that. Learning about meditation and breath work, and having a concept, like I always say, I'm not real big on belief, but having a concept that there is more than what we see in the physical world. There's so much more to this existence than that. And being able to go into that quiet space, and I don't know if it came through when I read that chapter, but it's happened to me at so many times in my life, just getting quiet and allowing that breath to kind of flood your whole entire being with this quiet, safe, grounded energy. Breath is the key to getting there. It's the simplest thing in the world, so people dismiss it, that it's not really important, but breathing, even in the very worst moments, the hardest, heartbreaking, deep, dark moments, that breath will take you through to the other side of whatever it is that you're dealing with. You know, I think I said in the video before this at one point in the book, you know, the pain always subsides. It always eventually happens. Sometimes not as fast as we want it to. But anyway, I hope that clarifies what that chapter was saying. So I'm going to go on to the next chapter, 47. In the next few days, after conversations with my dad and Marianne, we decided it would work out really well if I could stay at their house and work at the kite store, my old store, through the busy season that summer. It would be just 8 weeks. That would help out my dad at the store, and it would save money and would buy me some time until a house became available up north where I wanted to be. It took more thoughtful, vigorous effort to adjust to this. Once I again accepted what was, I settled into the moment and felt a calming seeping in, confident that all was going to work out. It always does, doesn't it? Things always work out, one way or the other. So much energy is wasted on worrying about outcomes and trying to force things to happen the way that you want them, when you want them. But if you can possibly just relax and accept what is, trusting that everything works out, you save yourself so much pain. Working at my old store was a pleasure. It kept me busy and kept me free from any drama or negative thoughts or worries that wanted to creep in if I wasn't so preoccupied. As I approached the end of the 8 weeks, when I had a day off, I would take the 2-hour jaunt up north to see the kids and look for housing and work. 3 days before the end of the 8-week stint, I finally landed a place to live. I had found an ad on Craigslist for a furnished house that sat on Young's Bay in Astoria. I made plans to drive up and stay in a lovely little hotel on a hill up above the water so that in the morning I could get a jump on seeing this house before I got snatched up. After checking in and getting settled, I got a call from the nice lady named Ray that was renting the house. Ray said that she was showing the house later that day to another lady, but if that didn't work out, I could see it the next morning. Oh man, here I was ready to move in a couple of days and still had nowhere to move to. My fingers were crossed that this house would work out, but this didn't sound too promising. Ray called back just a little while later and said she would show the house to me first thing in the morning. Whew, what a relief. Early the next morning, I checked out of the hotel and drove through the quaint little city of Astoria. There were dozens of cool little boutiques, coffee houses, pubs, and restaurants lining Highway 101 as I drove through. Under the enormous Megler Bridge, the Columbia was dotted with ships, barges, and sea life. When I drove up the little hill to the home, I could see it would have a spectacular view of the river. I met Ray, who was a striking 87-year-old, white-haired, smiling woman, dressed in a bright yellow vest over a white turtleneck and white ked sneakers. She welcomed me kindly. We walked down a steep stone stairway to the entrance of the house. As I entered, the first thing I noticed was the giant picture window looking out on the water. The little house was chock full of antique furniture, full bookshelves, and botanical paintings done by Ray herself. The upstairs was a long, narrow bedroom and a bathroom with low vaulted ceilings. I bumped my head on the ceiling as we ascended up the stairway. The queen-size bed was situated facing out another large group of windows looking out on the water. Enormous pine trees framed the view. I told Ray it was perfect, and she invited me next door to her house where I could fill out a rental agreement. Yay! Just like that, I had a place to lay my head. Ray said it was month to month, so I didn't have to commit to staying for any length of time, which gave me peace of mind about taking it straight away. I brought my son by later that day to make sure he approved. He loved the view and didn't really care that his room was filled with a flowery wallpaper border and white wicker furniture. He was just happy that he had his own bathroom attached to his room, complete with a clawfoot bathtub. We moved in a couple days later. This was such a perfect spot for us. I already had all of my things in storage, and since the house was furnished, I had very little to do to get us settled. It was ironic that I, the consummate modernist, was now living in this little vintage, antique-infused, tea house style house on the hill. I made it my own with Buddha statues, plants, fresh flowers, and candles that saturated the air with a combination of sandalwood and linen. This is where I resided as I wrote this. My bedroom, which I like to call the clubhouse because it feels like a cozy little treehouse, is where I do my meditations, my yoga, my writing. I awoke this morning to find a rainbow on the water, and later, when I started my yoga practice, I came up on my first cobra pose to see a huge bald eagle flying past my windows. Deer grace our yard and are found peeking in our windows here every day too. It's quite an inspirational place, and I so value the beauty and connection I can enjoy with the nature I am surrounded by. Everything about my life is different than I thought it would be. There were so many things I identified myself with, and they were all gone. I had a long list of what had made me, me. I was a Jehovah's Witness, no longer. I was a wife, no longer. I was a daughter to my mother, no longer. I was a social butterfly with numerous friends and a huge family, not anymore. I owned a cutting-edge modern house of my own design, gone. I was a business owner, history. On and on the list goes of everything I had to let go of, things I missed and mourned, and things I didn't. But settling in here would awaken me to an understanding of why all this went down like it did. And I'm going to read one more chapter because it's so short. So 48. The first week I was here in Astoria, my sister Cindy came up from California to stay with me for a week. I can't tell you how invaluable this was to me. I was new here. There was no one here except my kids, and they were both working and playing every day. Cindy and I did some sightseeing and checked out some local restaurants in between laughing and talking. This time was a great way for me to get comfortable and acclimated to my new city. When Cindy left, I put my ear to the ground and dug in hard to find work. During these weeks, I started to get phone calls for jobs back in California from the advertising I'd done while I was there. Too little, too late, but it boosted my confidence that I would find work here and all would be well. Having this little house mostly to myself was nice, peaceful, and quiet. But I started to feel very alone. Riley was working a lot, and I had day upon day on my own. Looking out on the Columbia River, you can see where it ends and the Pacific begins. It really feels sometimes like I'm out at the end of the earth. Mostly, I guess, because I'm not connected to anybody here. I once again recognized the need to accept what was. I didn't really know why I was here, except for the fact that my daughter was close by. I'd find myself looking out on the many anchored ships loitering in the Columbia, and ironically find myself feeling like I had no anchor to anything. I felt untethered. It was a sad feeling, kind of empty and haunting. But in this sadness, I did recognize that as lonely as this place and circumstance felt, this was indeed the perfect place and time for me to be creative. I had been working on this book very sporadically for over 4 years. I knew even years ago when I started writing little snippets that this book was somehow an important part of my path of free will. But I had been feeling a bit stagnant in the process. I just couldn't seem to get the wheels turning. I wouldn't even call it writer's block because I wasn't even putting myself in front of the computer to write. I guess life had throttled me hard enough to dislodge my confidence in even knowing where I was going and what my life was about. So what the hell was I going to write about? How I'd screwed up my life? How I was alone and melancholy and had no clue what to do next? As I waited patiently for calls or emails from prospective employers or clients, I would try to write, but found myself distracted, frittering away the hours with Facebook or playing Scrabble online. As I puttered around the house one beautiful but dull morning, I perused the bookshelf in the living room. I spied some interesting biographies, poetry collections, and novels. But then something caught my eye. Writing the Memoir by Judith Barrington. Well, I think this little book was just sitting on this shelf waiting for me. As I tucked into it, I found that this little book was exactly what the doctor had ordered. It spoke to some of the most challenging questions I had had in the anticipation of telling my story. It contained practical suggestions and answer to those things that seemed to be holding me back. I tore through the book in no time. I had post-its all throughout it, highlighting the things that helped the most. Beautiful little coincidences, like finding this perfect little book when I did, give me faith. I don't know whether to say I have much faith. I have felt at times like someone who had been duped by a cult, and since waking up from that, have been quite leery of believing in anything. Love is really the only thing I can say I unequivocally believe in. But the serendipity and synchronicity that I have encountered and have been party to does tell me that there is so much more than meets the eye in this life. So that was where I ended up writing my book, in that little spot looking out the window. And it didn't take me long at all. Once I got to typing, it flew out of me really fast. And I'm going to try not to say anything because we're, kind of tapering off the last, I think we might only have 2 more videos after this with the chapters that are left. So what I would say, because there's so much kind of tumultuous issues and challenges to face and everything, one thing that came to mind as I was reading is, especially with the idea in mind that I'm talking to a lot of XJWs, but it probably matters to people who aren't, is the idea that, when you don't have their belief system, when you're not following their rules and you're not with what they perceive to be the one and only true path to God's approval and all that, they kind of have always painted that, well, if you leave this organization, get ready because your life's going to be a nightmare because you're not going to have, God's blessing, and you're going to be on Satan's side. Well, if that logic really worked, Satan would be very happy that we're not doing that, and he would, make sure we won the lottery and, made sure everything was wonderful for us. So anyway, I just think that's one thing that some of us can end up feeling a little bit of when we leave. It's like, oh, is God punishing us? Are things going badly because I'm not doing things the way Jehovah's Witnesses said I was supposed to do it? And, to be perfectly honest, I was so convinced that it was not the truth that I never had that thought. But people that I love did have that thought at times after leaving. And so that was something that kind of had to be addressed. Because you just can't have it both ways. If you're going to say that God intervenes and can bless us because of our efforts, well, there's a lot of people that do that religion that get cancer, that get in car accidents, that have all kinds of problems. So you kind of can't have it both ways. This belief system that if you're doing good, everything's going to go right for you. And we all know they talk the other side of that anyway. Oh, well, everything will be okay in the paradise. So anyway, that's kind of a ramble, but I hope you got my point. This whole time I've been doing this, I'm like, I can't script this. I can't tell myself what I'm going to talk about. So I just have to wing it. So I'm really glad that you guys are hanging with me and allowing me to just ramble on about my different musings about life and spirituality and religion, etc. And I'm so happy you're here. And I wish you all peace and happiness and some fun today.